Hello and welcome to another Quaranstream. I am your host, JoeMagician, and today we'll be talking about the worst, or at least tied for worst person beyond the wall, with Varamyr the Sixskins, and that is, of course, Craster, a daughter-wiving servant of the cold gods that meets his righteous end during a very, very odd mutiny. Something I'll be making a video about in the future, that whole weirdness of the mutiny. What drives this horrific person to commit his crimes against humanity? How exactly does this deal with the others work? And why is he in this story? George, why are you writing characters like this? Why is Craster existing? Well, we'll be talking all about that and more over the next 2 hours. My phone's making sounds. Okay. Got a new phone, so it's doing stuff I don't want to. Oh, the beard's filling in? It's doing okay. It only took me like a month and a half to get what some people get in a few days, so huzzah. As usual, if you're your first time here, please make sure you subscribe, leave a comment, hit the like button. If we get to 150 likes, the old wizard hat's going on. 175, the Germ hat. Last time we actually broke 200 when Jeff the fandom villain was here, and I didn't really know what to do with it. That'll be a problem for another day, unless it happens again, and then we'll figure out something on the fly. Because I really do appreciate you guys slamming those like buttons for me. If you want to support the channel, you can obviously go to patreon.com/JoeMagician, where you can get access to the amazing patron Slack. You can get access to early content, of which will be coming soon. 2 new videos with a few more in planned. You can get access to the patron-only episodes, like the analysis of Meat House Man, the Expanse episode with the Shay of History of Westeros, discussions of, what was it? Cripples, Bastards, and Broken Things with Eliana of Girls Gone Canon, and more coming, including the patron-only episode on analysis of Sand Kings, George R. R. Martin's best short story that is not in A Song of Ice and Fire. I figure we'll go from one to the other. I'm glad you guys enjoy hanging out on these Saturdays with me. It's become a nice distraction. Oh, people are drinking already? I am not. I just have some water. And a little bit of the shakes from all the coffee. But, that's how it goes. And, of course, Super Chats. And I put the PayPal link. It's actually stickied to the top of the live chat. So I don't have to keep saying it. And the mods don't have to keep putting it. It's just right there. You can just click on it. And we actually have 3 already. $5 from Danny McKay. As per usual, thank you so much, Danny. Very generous. And $10 from Ramona. No question attached, no comment attached to it, but of course, as usual, she does have patron questions for me to answer. Thank you, Ramona. And one here from Amy Blackfire in the chat. She does have a patron question, but she also has a feminist rant on Craster she wants me to talk about. And we will get to that. I'll get to that. But first, I want to start off. I did this last week with Jeff, and I actually kind of liked how it turned out. People have been sending me more emails, which they haven't in a while, but you can to AskJoeMagician@gmail.com. And I got an email here from Jeff Stern. Jeff very much wanted to tell me about his tinfoil, and I thought I would just read the relevant part. So here it goes. Germ does not put descriptions in without purpose. He chose to describe the manner in which Varys and the kindly man walk soundlessly in the same language over and over. Also, Germ describes Varys smelling of perfumes or scented breath at several places. Why? Why then does Germ describe the kindly man as sweetening his breath whenever he could? Varys is a faceless man. That we can all agree upon, right? His ability to alter his appearance is mentioned at several places in Game of Thrones, when talking to Illyrio in the tunnels of the Red Keep, and when visiting Ned Stark in secret to advise him King Robert is in danger, and in A Clash of Kings, when helping Tyrion visit with Alalea, I forget how to pronounce that one, and with Shay. Also, when Varys appears in the epilogue of A Dance with Dragons to assassinate Kevin Lannister, he is with children, including a skinny girl. Is this the waif? Why does Gurren beat us over the head with Arya viewing her as the waif, if not to draw the string between Varys and the kindly man? So, I do like, I do not think that Varys is the kindly man. I mean, like, the time frames don't really work out. We know that Varys never actually, he did not leave Westeros, as he did in the show. He stayed in King's Landing incognito ever since he helped Tyrion escape Essos. But it's very true that the kindly man and Varys and the faceless man in general do share a lot of characteristics in common. And it's good to catch up to pick up on these things, because it allows you to draw comparisons between the different characters and the different plot lines that he's weaving together. So, like Varys, yeah, he is a master of disguise. He appears totally different. In the show, they did this to a limited amount when he would wear some disguises, but he's much better at it in the books. Very faceless man-like in terms of his ability to completely change. Although this goes back to his history as a mummer, or essentially a member of a troupe of actors, basically. So he knows how to do makeup, he knows how to change his voice, and all these kind of things much better than the average person does. The thing that's missing, though, is that Varys does not have anybody he's trying to tutor at the moment. That's the whole thing with the kindly man and the House of Black and White. They are turning Arya into something. Varys isn't turning anybody into anything. I mean, you could say that he's trying to disguise young Griff as Aegon Targaryen, but that's kind of largely out of his hands. That's more Lyrio's thing. Varys kind of sets him up. He gives him Jon Connington. He gives him Halden Halfmaester, gives him likely Septa Lemore, like we talked about a lot in the last stream. But I do think it's interesting that George is making these characters who are very good at disguise seem like each other and use similar tricks. In a way, it kind of demystifies the faceless men a lot, because we know about Jack and Hagar, and we know about Arya, and they wear the faces and their appearances change massively. But a large part of that is that they also need to know how to act. They also need to know how to behave like their subject, which actually Jaqen's not very good at. Like when he shows up as Pate in the A Feast for Crows epilogue. When Sam shows up, he goes, "It's me, Pate the Pig Boy." And then we know from the Feast for Crows chapter that Pate hates that name, that he never wants to be called that, which means he's probably going to get noticed. It's not just, you can't just look like somebody, you have to act like them too. And I think that's kind of what George is pulling at here with Varys, that Arya still has a ways to go. Shockweed says, "Is there any evidence of Varys having spent time in Braavos? I thought the Mad King brought him over straight over from Lys." I don't know if Varys ever went to Braavos. He does come from Lys. He probably has contacts everywhere. He has little birds everywhere. You have to develop those somehow. So maybe he has been to Braavos or something like that. Actually, the character that the kindly man is most like, if you go back and read it, is actually Bloodraven. The way his appearance, the way he has, Arya describes him as having a worm coming out of his eye socket. You look at the description Bran gives of Bloodraven, he actually has a little weirwood root coming out of his empty eye socket that looks like a worm. They both look half dead, like skulls with flesh on them. And also Arya and Bran's stories are parallels, where they're both learning to use their abilities and being trained for something bigger. That's a good one to go look at. No, I don't think Varys is a kindly man, but I would actually be interested to see what would happen if Varys interacted with the Faceless Man. In particular, we know he probably did, in that he poses as a Gallower, and Jack and Hagar, the Faceless Man, was taken from his dungeons. So was there an interaction there? Grayer and I have argued about this quite a lot. She thinks there's nothing there. I think George intended us to wonder about the fact that since Jaqen and Biter and Rorge came from the King's Landing dungeons, Varys is in charge of those secretly, then how did that work? Did Varys maybe catch Jack and Hagar, noticing that his acting wasn't as good as his face swapping? I think that would be fascinating. But thank you for the question, Jeff. Yeah, that one came from email. Yes. Yes, people, Aaron, good point. People smelling good, and this is particularly noticeable in their society. Not a lot of deodorant going around. Not a lot of bathing for most people. So, although there is something to note that we would think everybody smelled stinky because we're used to a certain level of what's the right word? A certain level of grooming in our current society, but back then it would be not as noticeable unless somebody like truly smelled horrific, like they were running around rolling in crap or something like that. All right. I do like those questions because they're like a nice little diversion before I spend the next 2 hours talking about something else. That is going to be a part of a. Actually, no, that's an old theory I wrote. The comparisons between the Kindly Man and Bloodraven. I use that as a way of maybe linking Braavos and the children together. Didn't really fit into the theory I put it in, which I'm going to be redoing at some point. But it's just a thing to go back and read. Go read Bran's descriptions of Bloodraven and Dance with Dragons, and read Arya's descriptions of the Kindly Man, and they seem really similar. It's likely on purpose. Hygiene, yes. Yes, like Reek, Curse Franks. Yes, if you're like Reek and you're doing horrible, horrible things, then it will be noticeable. All right, so I got a quote here to start off with our discussion about Varys. So this one goes, "The man's half mad, I won't deny it. So long as he gives us a hot meal and a chance to dry our clothes, I'll be happy. Tywin said Craster was a kinslayer, liar, raper, and craven, and hinted that he trafficked with slavers and demons. And worse," the old forester would add, clacking his wooden teeth. "There's a cold smell to that one. There is." Nice way of describing Craster. I believe this comes from before we meet him, so George is laying it on pretty thick that Craster's going to be a particularly vile character in the story. And that, he traffics with slavers and demons. Well, we know the demons, it's the ice demons. We learn that one later. The slavers one's a little strange. We don't actually see that, but he's supposed to be like the embodiment of every bad thing in their society. Varamyr is supposed to be like the ultimate bad green seer, or ultimate bad skin changer, basically. That's his role in the story. But Craster is supposed to be just like, how far can you push a terrible person? How far would they go? Well, pretty far, as it turns out, when he turns into this kind of guy. Actually, while we're here, why don't I just go ahead and answer that question from Amy? Because it's going to come up. Yes, always listen to Tywin. He is always right. So the super chat from Amy Blackfire, $15. Very appreciate it very much, Amy. Thank you. So what she said, "I could do so much feminist analysis on Craster, but too long didn't read. He represents everything that's wrong with the patriarchy. He sexually assaults his daughters and controls them. It is disgusting that they are called quote-unquote wives, which hints at monogamy and consent, neither of which is there. Some of the fandom will say most women in Westeros don't consent to being married, but at least they aren't marrying their dad." Oof. Strong words there. There is kind of an analysis there that that you could consider him like a patriarchal culture, or just taken to its extreme. Like, what would some people do if there were literally no laws stopping this kind of thing? And in real life, there are people that do horrific things like Craster. People that kidnap others and hold them as slaves, essentially, like kind of what Craster does. There's cults that trap people, and particularly women inside of them, inside the cult, and don't allow them to leave. There's all sorts of horrific examples from the real world, and yeah, it's I don't. You could call them captives. Like that's probably the stronger or more apt word for what his daughters actually are. I just because like he gave them some mead and said they are married does not mean it's like real or anything. Yeah, not marry. Don't marry your dad. Don't marry family members. That's probably a good lesson. Yeah, I mean, there are cultures that have multiple wives, but usually not family members. That is taking a little far. It's almost like I was going to get to this later, but it's probably good now because you guys are kind of talking about it. Like, what about the relationship between the Valyrians in Incest and what Craster's doing? And it's kind of like Craster just took it an extra step, because it's particularly vile that Craster is marrying his daughters and then his granddaughters, and I think his great granddaughters. I'm not sure if he's at that generation yet. But also, when you look at the Valyrians, I mean, Aegon the Conqueror married both of his sisters. Sibling incest is considered illegal in most places, and the Valyrians go for it. It's almost like if you just took it an extra step, because as you guys are noting, even the Valyrians did not seem to go for parent-to-child incest, as far as we know. But they did do first cousins, they did siblings, they did uncles and nieces and aunts and nephews. It's basically like one step further. And I do think about that in terms of like, and also we know that some of the Valyrian marriages were not, there was no consent. We know that they were forced to by kings. They were decreed and had to go through with it. It's not awesome, but people generally have a very high opinion of the Valyrians and a very low opinion of Craster, even though there are similarities in their behavior in terms of incest and forced marriages. So I think that's an interesting comparison to think about as we're talking about him. Just keep in mind that there is an entire culture that is very highly held in regard in this story and in the fandom that largely does the same things as Craster, just like if you turned it down from 11 to like 6 or 7. And actually, there seems to be almost a practical purpose to it. Oh, really? Ramona says in the World of Ice and Fire, the Valyrians did go for this kind of marriage. Huh. Interesting. Yeah, what's good for the Fire Elves is not good for Craster, I guess. Yeah, just keep that in mind, that there's a very good case to be made that George is drawing a comparison between Craster and the Valyrians, and maybe supposed to think about that a little bit harder as we learn about their history and the kind of marriages they were forced to go through, and how it may just be that like people like them better, and that's why they allowed them to get away with it, and people don't like Craster, and therefore it is very awful. But I mean, like, really, Aerys and Rhaella, that was a forced sibling marriage by the king. That's not okay. That should be like on Craster levels of horrificness. But anyway. So let's go into his history now that we've gone into a diatribe about Valyrian culture. So where did he come from? Who is this guy? Where did he come from? So we get a fairly grim story of Craster's upbringing and talked about the curse. He's supposedly cursed. So this comes from Ygritte. She's talking to Jon Snow, who, by the way, Ygritte knows about Craster. He's like famous in wildling culture. So he says, she says, Craster's more your kind than ours. His father was a crow who stole a woman out of White Tree Village, but after he had her, he flew back to his wall. She went to Castle Black and once to show the crow his son, but the brothers blew his horns and run her off. Craster's blood is black, and he bears a heavy curse. Well, okay, so this is not going to be an uncommon story throughout the history of the Night's Watch, that rangers went on a quote-unquote ranging and ended up having sex with wildling girls, women, whoever. There's really no oversight for what they do beyond the wall except for each other. So definitely this is in no sense the first time this has happened. It's probably happened many, many times. So the blood is black. Usually when the wildlings say a character's blood is black, they mean that his blood is of a Night's Watch ranger. But then he bears a heavy curse. It's kind of confusing what Ygritte is talking about here. Like, what curse could she possibly be talking about? I guess there's a sort of a social stigma he would face within wildling culture that he is an actual acknowledged bastard of a Night's Watch ranger. But again, there would be more of these. And actually, there's one very famous character who shares this exact story, and that is Mance Raider. Mance Raider shares the exact same background as Craster. He is the son of a Night's Watch ranger and a wildling woman. The only difference between them is that Mance was raised in the Night's Watch, whereas Craster was raised in the wildling culture. But you would think that would make Mance the more cursed character, right? Because he's the one that actually grew up as a Night's Watch ranger. He is literally a crow, whereas Craster is just related to them. So why exactly is Craster more hated? Why is he bearing a heavy curse just for having black blood? It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, and it kind of points to the fact that there may be a lot more to Craster than meets the eye. That the curse has nothing to do with the social stigma. That we find out later that it's more than just being related to the Night's Watch. But this is sort of a characterization that a lot of characters mention, that he is a bastard. They mention that he is related to the Night's Watch, and it's like, okay, I guess so. I think it largely comes down to the difference between Mance and why Mance is accepted in a king and Craster is not is behavior. I don't think it has a lot to do with their blood or their upbringing or anything like that, because by all accounts, Mance should be hated. They should have killed Mance on sight. Instead, they made him king. So yeah, but you can imagine that as he was growing up, Craster would be a character that grew up with probably a lot of stigma around him that people would tease him about. Think Ramsay Snow and the way that being called a bastard really gets to him. Well, it gets to Craster too. People call him a bastard and he gets furious about it. And also, we know where Craster is from, actually. He's from White Tree Village. That's that same village that the Night's Watch goes through when they go through on their ranging. And there's that giant weirwood, and it's got the empty village with those little villages. That's where Craster is from. That's his home. And we have a quote here. It said, "Sam looked dubious. Dolorous Ed says Craster's a terrible savage. He marries his daughters and obeys no laws but those he makes himself. And Dylan told Gren he's got black blood in his veins." Again, the black blood. "His mother was a wildling woman who lay with a ranger, so he's a Suddenly, he realized what he was about to say. He was about to call him a bastard in front of John. John was about to be upset at him. I think it's an interesting connection when you think about Craster and growing up in White Tree Village, that the village he's from is the one where we see human sacrifice, the one where they go and poke around into the weirwood's mouth and they find bones in there. And it seems to be that the inhabitants were giving over children to the weirwoods. When we learn about what Craster does later, maybe it makes a little more sense why he's been sacrificing his children. Perhaps White Tree Village for a long time has been engaging in a similar kind of child sacrifice, but not to the weirwood gods, but to the cold gods instead. People are bringing up the Bloodraven connection to Craster. Actually, that's probably a good time to talk about this. Which Night's Watch Ranger is he related to? Well, okay, so we don't get a lot of information about it, but what we do know about him is that he looks nothing like Aemon Targaryen. He looks nothing like Bloodraven. He's kind of a he's very stocky and powerfully built. He's described as having a wide, flat face with a flat nose. He doesn't have Valyrian features to him, like not even a little bit. So I think you can kind of rule out the whole Targaryen connection. Because if he is, he took literally nothing from them. Not the hair color, not the purple eyes, not the red eyes of Bloodraven, not the albino, not the build, none of that. So who could he be related to? Well, I actually wrote a theory about this back in the day, and I titled it, hang on a second, The Parents of Craster. And it was kind of tinfoily and kind of bad in some parts of it. I realized that we're wrong in retrospect. I wrote this about 5 years ago. But the one that that came up that I thought was the most interesting is that Craster has a few tendencies that are totally out of place for wildling. In particular, he has quite a lot of knowledge of what's going on south of the wall, and not only that, he's taught his daughters or his wives or his captives or whatever to have southern manners. Like, for instance, Gilly talks more like a serving girl from for Westerosi culture than a wildling girl like Ygritte. And it's much the same with the rest of them. And when you start following the tracks and you go back and you look at all the named rangers and who could it be, the biggest clue is that there's some sort of connection with the Night King or something like that. And maybe there's some magical blood going on. Possibly, maybe, I don't know. I ended up concluding that he's actually the son of the Night's Watch Ranger and Knight that almost became Lord Commander but did not. And I think it was Sir Wynton Stout. The main reason is that Stout is from, well, not only that, he's Wynton Stout is a Sir. He's from Barrowton, so he follows the Faith of the Seven. Gilly and Craster have knowledge of the Faith of the Seven, which very few others do, other than Mance, who's been on both sides of the wall. Also, George has hinted in the past in a question he got from a reader, are there other bastard or cadet branches of House Stark out there? Because there's so few of them. I've talked about this in other live streams, that it seems like there's not enough Starks to go around. There should be a lot more. And he answered very cryptically that there's actually a cadet branch in Barrowton. Well, it can't be House Dustin because they're not a cadet branch, but the only other named house is House Stout. And Stout and Stark are kind of cognates. So I think it would be interesting if the others were interested in Craster because he has a blood tie to House Stark, and the connections between House Stark and the others seem to be pretty strong, I would say. So that's my guess. I think it's Wynton Stout, and it's also noted that Wynton Stout almost became Lord Commander of the Night's Watch once, but ended up losing the vote. And I think the fact that if he was a ranger who everyone knew his son was Craster, that could be a reason that they were like, okay, Wynton, like we can't vote for you anymore. We know you broke your vows. You cannot be that guy. I don't know, the existence of House Stout and the way that Stark means strong and Stout means strong means the same thing. That seems to be George giving a little wink that you should look a little harder at the only other named house that lives in Barrowton. So that's my guess. I think it's Wynton Stout. And that would also tie him, yes, to the original Night King. You guys are right there. It's hinted by Old Nan that the Night King himself was a member of House Stark before before he joined the Night's Watch. So it's not I don't think it's a Targaryen side that that they're interested in Craster for. I think it's the Stark blood. I think if he was a Valyrian, he would look it in any way. Craster does not look Valyrian in any sense of the word. Hang on, I'll drop the theory to you guys if you want to go back and read it. I'm just going to say from the start that some parts of the logic are really bad, and there are parts that are not true that I realized afterwards. But I still think the conclusion is right. I just need to re-argue the point. So, yes, therefore the curse mod, Mary. See, you're getting there. Winton Stout, father of Craster. So that gets back to, like, how did this happen? How did Craster end up with a keep? Like, what happened here? Especially since we know he's from White Tree Village. He has no wealth. He's just one guy. Why is he off on his own and able to do this? A slight diversion here. Did you guys know there actually is a real Craster's Keep? There's a real place. It's in the town of Craster, which is in Northumberland in England. And it's near Hadrian's Wall. And I think this is significant because Craster is a tourist village, and George, when he was younger, he took a trip all throughout England, and he tells a particular story about how he went to go see Hadrian's Wall, and he stood on it, and it's that moment he thought about the giant ice wall that would be, and what would happen when you cut a country in half with a wall like Hadrian's Wall. So I'm guessing that the name Craster comes from this town. He probably stopped there at some point. There's a real family named Craster. The keep itself is called Craster Tower, and it was a just like a 14th century keep or something like that. And if you look at the name Craster, the name means crow's earthwork. So a building, an earthwork building built by crows. Craster is related to the Night's Watch, who are often called crows. So there you go. I think that's one of those things that I came across when I was doing the research. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. Wow, there's actually a real Craster's Keep. So any of you guys out there that are from England, you can go see Craster's Keep. Oh, another PayPal donation. Hey, Sanrixian. Oh, there you are. There you are in the chat. How's it going, Sanri? Thank you so much. Thank you for the very generous $25. You're the best. Yes, Hadrian's Wall is not so huge now. Oh, yes, slam that like button. We got 110, get to 150. Wizard hats going on. Everyone loves the wizard hat. Yeah, go see Hadrian's Wall. Go see Craster's Keep in Craster. It's a little sleepy fishing village. A lot of tourists go there. Apparently it's a very nice place. So I would guess that that's what it's that's where Craster and all this stuff came from. He has hung on to the name over time and eventually wrote it into a character. Okay, so let's talk about the Craster's Keep in the books. So, like, it's really unclear how he was able to build it, how he was able to defend it. Why haven't Wildling Raiders taken him out? Or why haven't the Watch taken him out? Like, it seems like they should. He doesn't do anything important. Well, he kind of does. Oh, hey, Amanda. How's it going? Welcome to the Craster live stream. And Craster doesn't trade in any goods. He doesn't trade in anything he makes, but he does trade in information. And that's kind of what you can tell from how he keeps himself alive. When you look at Craster's Keep, it's actually a little bit north of White Tree Village, north of Castle Black. And it's like the exact right place to serve where the Night's Watch Rangers would want to stop by and stay the night, during which Craster would gather information about who they were, where they're going, and he could sell that, let's say, to the Wildlings. And do vice versa. If any Wildling Raiders stop by, well, then Craster could get information and then sell that to the Rangers. And he ended up making himself too important to kill, basically. Not only is his house a good shelter, I mean, his keep is a good shelter to stay out of the cold, but it's also just, he's playing both sides against each other. Neither side is willing to give up the information he provides, so he sort of has protection as long as neither of them gets so mad they want to kill him. I mean, there's obviously a third faction, the others, that is keeping him in place and alive, but this is probably how it started out. Although it seems odd that this wasn't taken care of by White Tree Village. It seems like that would be the more natural place to go, but you never know. So I think that's essentially how Craster got set up. But I think it's notable to say that why doesn't he live in White Tree Village? That's where his home is, and he's famous. So I think it's very likely that at some point Craster actually got exiled from his home, and maybe his mother with him. When we look at Craster's whole thing about marrying his daughters and systematic incest, you have to wonder if maybe this is a behavior he was taught. Like, maybe he had an incestuous relationship with his mother, and that got him kicked out of the village. I mean, he's a raper too, so you never know. Like, when you think about the things that Egret really thinks is a problem, one of the big ones is the fact that when you steal a wife, I guess, in wildling culture, if you want to call it that, the courtship or whatever the hell it is, you have to make sure you take it from somebody who's another village, because you don't want to end up with inbred kids. Well, Craster does the opposite of that. And if he was if that's, you know, that could be kind of part of the curse and why he's so infamous. Okay, wait a second. With his mother is a step too far. We're talking about the guy that marries his daughters and his granddaughters and his great-granddaughters. Like, it would not be that ridiculous if that his mind was essentially broken by abuse when he was young, and he's just sort of continuing a cycle. We also don't know who his first wife is, so there's one that could be creepy for you. I also want to point out here a very real possibility that Craster's Keep was not something he came up with on his own. It could be very possible that his Night's Watch Ranger father or the Rangers themselves helped him set up his keep. That maybe they helped him build it, that maybe they gave him supplies, and that he's essentially set up as a Night's Watch outpost a little bit north of White Tree Village to essentially be a spy for them. Has he made it to great-granddaughters yet? Good question. He has 19 wives at the moment, and there are girls at the keep that are too young to marry, so maybe within a couple years he'd probably get there. Yeah, I think there's a very real possibility, considering the Night's Watch knows that he sacrifices his children, that they have a good relationship with him, that his whole Craster's Keep thing may be sponsored, essentially. Which adds to the horrificness of it, that the Night's Watch knew all along who he was, and they took advantage of his outsider status in order to give themselves an advantage over the wildlings. That would be a horrific thing, but we know that, you know, they deal with it basically anybody. And when you look at Craster's Keep itself, I mean, it's called a keep, but it's actually just like kind of a shitty rundown shack. It's got like a small fence. It's got some room for animals. There's actually no noted gardens or crops around there, which keep that in mind when we're talking about the Night's Watch and the relationship they have, because Craster has a lot of food, because he's able to feed himself and his 19 wives and all the children that he's going to marry in the future, but he doesn't produce anything. Like, he doesn't have any animals left. He doesn't have any crops. He doesn't have any vegetables, and yet he has all this stuff. I think you have to draw the conclusion that much of his ability to feed himself is trade for information, that the Night's Watch essentially give him food to keep him going. There's also another possibility that Craster essentially acts like a pirate or a raider himself, and that like, for instance, when they get to White Tree Village, there's nothing left. All the inhabitants have left, but they couldn't have carried everything with them. It's a permanent settlement, so there must have been stuff they left behind they couldn't carry, yet it's all gone. And you can imagine that maybe Craster, after they left, or after they were chased off by, let's say, the others, that he went in and stole everything. On his own, Craster's Keep cannot survive, so he very much has to be reliant on trading or gifts, probably from the Night's Watch. And we actually see that happen within the story. When J.R. Mormont shows up, he gives him an axe. In the past, he's given him a crossbow. Well, why wouldn't he give him something else? Why wouldn't they give him food? Why wouldn't they give him supplies? The ability to care for himself and his family. Yes, guilty Undertaker. So if all of Craster's food comes from the Watch, does that mean the Night's Watch mutineers were taking what is theirs? I have puzzled about that for a long time, and it was the realization I came to. I was like, they kept accusing Craster of having tons of food underneath his house, but none of them have been down there, so how do they know? Well, some members of the Night's Watch probably did know that they'd been giving him food from their stores for quite a long time, paying him off. Hey, thank you for the super sticker, Stephanie Spain. $3, very generous. Thank you very much. Yeah, I think that's part of the mutiny, and that's why I'm gonna do a video about this in the future. But just keep that in mind. That yeah, I think the Night's Watch members that were on the Great Ranging were very much aware of Craster having a lot of food squirreled away because they gave it to him. They may have delivered it, but it's a secret. Much like how Mormont already knows about the child sacrifices. So yeah, gross. But it kind of explains how he's able to survive out there and feed everybody, because he has no other way. He basically has a large settlement in one building. You have to be getting supply somewhere. So one other thing to talk about when we're talking about like how Craster survives, and I think it's a good time to get into like his relationship exactly to the others. Like, what the hell's going on here? So when we see this in the books, it's kind of set up as a mystery at first. We get the line that I read at the top about him being interacting with demons and being a horrible person. And then over time, as John is at Craster's Keep, he ends up getting more and more suspicious. And finally, it's revealed that yes, he's giving his sons to the others. And I have a quote here. Just to give you a little taste of exactly how he thinks of his relationship with the others. Craster said, "A godly man got no cause to fear such. I said as much to that Mance Raider once when he come sniffing round. He never listened. No more, you crows with your swords and your bloody fires. That won't help you none when the white cold comes. Only the gods will help you then. You best get right with the gods." Gilly had spoken of the white cold as well, and she told them what sort of offerings Craster made to his gods. Sam had wanted to kill him when he heard. There were no laws beyond the wall, he reminded himself, and Craster is a friend to the Watch. Ooh. But that is the relationship to the others in a nutshell. Craster believes that he is sacrificing to a higher power, which, I mean, fair enough. The others are literal ice demons. They're basically immortal. They can bring back the dead. They may as well be gods. Better and more real than any of the other ones that he's likely to come across. The Faith of the Seven, even the Weirwood gods. People pray to them all the time, but nothing happens. Well, these ones are walking around. Ooh, Crouching Panther, Hidden Dragon. Do you think Craster recognized Jon Snow because of his family's ties to the Starks? It could be, but in my Cold Death in the Snow thing, I suggested that it had to do more with prophecy, or that the others informed him somehow that they were looking for a Stark, and he knows what they look like. But wait, you ran into a bear? What the hell's going on over there? Some other quotes here. We've had no such troubles here, and I'll thank you not to tell such evil tales under my roof. I'm a godly man, and the gods keep me safe. What gods? John was remembering that they'd seen no boys in Christchurch Keep, nor men either, save Craster himself. The cold gods, she said, the ones in the night, the white shadows. And then it goes on even further, and this is a tale that that I kind of keyed in on in an old theory I wrote, and I was like, wait a second, what is George doing here? So listen to this one. At Winterfell, one of the serving women told us stories, John went on. She used to say that there were wildlings who lay with the others to birth half-human children. Hearth tales, does Craster seem less than human to you? In 100 ways. He gives his sons to the wood. And I think there's a very real possibility that that there is, the others used to be human at some point. Maybe there is some kind of like other human hybrid population in the north. Maybe those are the inhabitants of like maybe White Tree Village. I also in the past I wrote a theory that is probably not true anymore, but I keyed in on this idea where I essentially argued that the reason they want Craster is that on half of his side he is part Stark, and on the other side he's related to that the mother has some kind of other blood to her or something like that. That there's a specific mix of magical blood that makes Craster in particular useful to the others in a way that apparently no one else is. That's one of those things that really sticks out. Like, you don't need to do this. Like, why Craster in particular? You could be going around shaking down any villages you want and taking the sons, or just killing the members of a village with your whites and just taking the children or the babies yourself. Like, you don't need Craster to do this, so it seems to be there's something special about him, which is weird to say considering he's such a massive piece of shit. But oh wow, 131 likes, very, very close. So yeah, he considers himself a acolyte, almost like a priest of the others. That again, you can kind of see why. It's they are real, they're tangible. They come around and shake him down and take his sons. It's not like although it's kind of like if you treated the Valyrians as gods, which they encourage, so you know, kind of makes sense. I know I write a lot of theories. So then we get into the whole mass incest and daughter wiving. Huzzah! We got here the part nobody likes, the worst part. So Craster obviously has this horrific practice where he would systematically marry his offspring and then get them pregnant again. Any boys would be given away to the others. There's a point where Gilly calls the others Craster's sons. And he has somewhere around, I'm going to say like 25 to 30 quote unquote daughters or granddaughters or great granddaughters under his roof. So you can assume a similar amount of sons was born, unless for some reason he had way more sons. So we can assume that there's probably somewhere around 30 to 40 others running around that are genetically Craster's kids. Oh, Amanda bringing up the excellent question. Are the babies sacrificed? Is there a White Walker daycare? Love the question. One of my favorite topics. So is there like a colony of baby others? The show certainly gave us that, where it showed the Night King touching the child and then his eyes turn blue. And so somehow that means he became one of the White Walkers. Yeah, they say 100 sons, but if you're looking at how many daughters he have, unless a lot of them died, and there's also a possibility that a lot of them ran away, but there seems to be quite, from what we know from Craster's family, there's probably like 30 to 40 others that are directly related to him. Maybe 100 is an exaggeration. But yeah, so we got there? Okay, hang on a second. Hat time. Don't call me Matthew. What's wrong with you, Mallory? Good timing, because what's his name? Gandalf retweeted John Webster's stream. So Gandalf hat. There we go, guys. Got the Gandalf hat. Remember 175? That one goes on. So yeah, that's probably how many sons are actually out there. But it's also not clear who his first wife was. We don't really know anything about her. Who started this whole thing with Craster, who allowed him to continue to marry their children or give away the sons. That's kind of why I raised the question, like, is it maybe he married his mother or something like that? Because it's hard to imagine who would stick around for this. I know, I'm sorry, Amy. It does cover up my hair. Definitely some wives could escape. And actually, this is something that Amy Blackfire, she asked in the patron Slack. Oh, wait. Well, it's kind of related, and I figured I would just lump them together. She said, to what extent is Craster's sexist, rapist behavior encouraged by the Night's Watch looking the other way? What does this say about the Night's Watch and acceptance of following a man's rules under his own roof? What about the agency and rights of Craster's daughters? Do they not deserve rights to make their own decisions? Well, for the first parts, there's a couple quotes that essentially tell you why the Night's Watch tolerate him. This one is, the man's half mad, I won't deny it, but you'd be the same if you spent your life in this cursed wood. Even so, he never turned a ranger away from his fire, nor does he love Mance Raider. He'll give us good counsel. So that's essentially the Night's Watch justification. They put up with him because he has a fire and a roof, and he's not a member of Mance Raider's army, and he gives them information. So that's kind of why. And then also, Gilly had spoken of the White Cold as well, and she told them what sort of offerings Craster made to his gods. Sam had wanted to kill him when he heard, there are no laws beyond the wall, he reminded himself, and Craster's a friend to the Watch. And that's kind of part and parcel with the whole Night's Watch as it exists today. They put up with anybody. They will take anybody in from the dungeons of Westeros to become a Night's Watch Ranger. That's something that John very much struggles with. They might have a noble purpose, but they're not noble in their acts, and they don't have a lot of options, and they just sort of go along with it. Which, yeah, I think really undercuts the whole morality of the Night's Watch as a function, because what's the point of protecting the wall if you're not protecting Craster's daughters from him? Shouldn't that be part of your mission? Like, if you're trying to save humanity, they're humanity. You should probably try and help them. And that's one of the things that John struggles with, is that he tries to reassert a moral core to the Night's Watch that isn't really there anymore. That Bowen Marsh represents, where they sort of just act like asshole lords instead of any sort of protection except to keep themselves alive. And that's essentially the relationship to Craster. But in terms of like what's going on with these daughters and why are they there, well, there can be quite a lot of things going on that's keeping them there that doesn't have anything to do with like any kind of lack of moral failings on the daughters' parts or any sort of like weakness or anything like that. It's there's quite a lot of things that Craster used to keep control. Number one is he grooms them. He grooms them from a very young age, and they're raised in a society where they're not really The only society they know is Christchurch Keep, much like Dany growing up thinking that she's going to marry Viserys. It's like, well, I guess that's just what's going to happen. I guess it's not wrong, because how would they know different? They've essentially been raised in a totally isolated cult. So that's one thing. They may not realize that there's anything wrong with it until they get older, at which point they may still run away. We don't know how many of his daughters have run away, but there's a few things that would keep them from doing it. So for one thing, being a daughter of Craster's a horrible, horrible person, and every wildling knows it. White Tree Village knows it. Mance's army knows it. Night's Watch knows it. It's like, where would you even go if you were one of them? Especially what if they may have never left the direct area around Christchurch Keep. If you're going to try to escape, you have to have somewhere to go, and there's a very real possibility that they don't know anything, that they don't know except going south. And what happens when a wildling comes up to the Night's Watch wall? Well, they blow their horns and shoots arrows on you, so you can't do that. You could try and get to White Tree Village, but they probably remember Craster and don't like him. So it's almost like he has them on an island, basically, in the haunted forest, where they can escape, but they escape only to die from starvation within like a week or something like that. If they even reach anybody, who knows if they would accept them? You'd hope so. I would hope that the wildling cultures around them would recognize how horrific what Craster is doing to them and throw them a bone, but you never know. The stigma around being related to him is pretty strong. And there's also a very real possibility, if you want to hate the Night's Watch even more, that the Rangers may go get his daughters for him. Like if there's Rangers on a ranging, we know that they pay him off. They may be paid off. He may get paid off in favors. So, for instance, let's say there's a particularly vile group of Rangers staying at Craster's place, and he says, "Oh, one of my daughters escaped. She went north." Would the Night's Watch Rangers maybe go and get her? Very possible. They seem to be okay with everything else going on, and not just because somebody's a ranger doesn't mean they're a good person. Could very well be that. And there's also the other very real possibility that the others are essentially keeping the daughters in place, that they sort of act as jailers, that maybe they have some whites hanging around Christchurch Keep at all times. Maybe there are always others in the woods around Christchurch Keep waiting for sons, and so maybe they herd the daughters back when they try to escape. For instance, Gilly knows about them. She's seen them. Maybe she's tried to run away too and been scared by the others and been forced back to go to the Christchurch Keep. There's a very real possibility that Craster just uses the connections around him to make sure that they never get to escape. It's yeah. Also, somebody in the chat said Craster the OG gaslighter. Yeah. There's a lot of stories about how people use systematic abuse and essentially position themselves as the better of two options in order to keep captives and the mentally abused when they should leave. Yeah, that's a good call, Carson. Craster is a classic case of necessary evil. That's how the Night's Watch feels about him. The Wildlings do not. They apparently just view him as evil. Yeah, Aaron. I mean, they have to know at some point when Craster has a son to give up. So there's probably someone around that they probably leave, maybe an advance force, just hanging out in the trees, waiting for them. We also know from Gilly that for some reason they take sheep. Haven't really puzzled that one out. It's a weird one. But yeah, and Tormund says much the same when he basically says that they're always around the White Mist's Not great. Basically, Craster's daughters just live in the worst possible environment. Nowhere to go. Maybe no knowledge of how to leave or where they would go. The Night's Watch Rangers themselves and the others perhaps making sure they can't ever leave. So that could be particularly horrific existence, and at some point maybe some of them just give up and just live with the fact that they do have a roof over their heads and they have food, and it's a pretty horrific life. Are there more Crashers out there? It doesn't seem to be. There seems to be just him. Although there is a note that there are some northern clans in the around Cannibal Bay or something like that maybe sacrifice to the cold gods. But we don't really interact with them. We don't really know who that is. It may just be stories. But the idea of giving up sons to the gods, as we've seen from White Tree Village, is probably not that out of place in wildling culture. So that's one of those things where John, that may be a misunderstanding from the Night's Watch about exactly what Craster is doing. They probably very much know that he's sacrificing to the woods because human sacrifice is a big part of old god worship. They may just think he's worshiping the old gods, not realizing it's actually the others. Yes, that's true, Aaron. We do have a butter cabal. There was a several-hour conversation about butter. We agreed that Kerry Gold, I think, is the best one. Hang on a second. Yes, Kerrygold butter is the best butter. They need sheep for their snowy capes. I don't really know. It's as to Amanda's question, what happens to them after they get sacrificed? Well, there's kind of really only two possibilities. Either they get turned into others and then they grow up very quickly. Instead of waiting 18 years, maybe within a few hours, their bodies are transformed into being full others. Or there's another possibility that since they seem to be made of magic in some way, that maybe there's a blood sacrifice element to it, and they kill the sons or something like that in some kind of blood magic ritual, and then their bodies are allowed to, or they get enough magic to recreate themselves. I don't have strong opinions on which way it goes. The show gave us the possibility that that the children essentially transform into those bodies, into the full-grown others as we see them. I tend to think of it in the second one, because Tormund tells us basically that they don't go away, that the others are ever present. They're always a white mist. And when you look at the Undying and other magical beings that have outlived their lives, there seems to be, and even with the second lives, I imagine that essentially what happens is that the others essentially possess the bodies of the sons and then essentially eat them up in the way that the Undying were trying to do to Dany, and then using that they create their bodies. I do not think that there is a White Walker daycare out there. I don't think there's 14-year-old White Walker edgelords with ice pimples or something hanging out. That would be a little bit too far for me to believe. I think that they just essentially possess the sons' bodies and then transform them maybe almost instantly into what they looked like in the past. Essentially, giving themselves their beards, giving themselves their facial features. And they're not really Crasher's sons in any sense anymore. They've just been transformed. Oh, grow as fast as a xenomorph. Good one, Isabel. Although it would be fun to see a White Walker society. What do they do all day? What do they do for fun? What Do they talk? Do they have like awesome debates in Scraw? Do they play Savas or something like that? I don't know. Maybe the sheep is producing milk for the babies. That is possibly people have brought up. I don't really know about that. But the important part here is that, like, when we're talking about Craster and the others, they obviously have some way of communicating with each other. Like, how does this work exactly? Because clearly Craster figured out at some point he has to give them their sons, and he worships them, and he apparently gives them information, so he has to have some way of doing it. So there's a few possibilities. I think the first one that makes the most sense to me is that the others and their magic appear to be psychic based. A lot of George's magic and all of his stories are essentially psychic abilities and telepaths. And I'm guessing that that's essentially how it works, because we know the others cannot talk. They speak in what's known as Scraw, which sounds like the cracking of ice on a lake. We ain't speaking that language. You ain't speaking Scraw. No, there's no conversation there. Maybe the others could understand Craster when he speaks, but he cannot understand back. So it would make sense to me since we know that like dream manipulation and that telepaths are basically a thing in A Song of Ice and Fire, if they rely on that they essentially go into his brain and send him dreams. Yeah, like go through Understanding, you're right there. The others sent Craster dreams, or they send him images in his head telling him what to do. That would make sense to me. There's also a practical way this could have happened. So you can imagine maybe young Craster with his first wife, and they're walking through the woods. Maybe he's out hunting, and they have their son with them, and they get surprised by the others. They're attacking. They're going to kill them. Oh my god, they're very, very scared. What are they going to do? Maybe Craster notices that they're looking at his child, and he offers up the child to essentially get away. And then maybe the other accepts the child, picks it up, and walks away. And he's like, huh, that was strange. And then does it again. And you can see maybe a relationship growing over time. But there has to be some sort of communication eventually, but that could be how it started. And I was thinking about in terms of like, so how exactly did the others contact Craster for the first time? And I thought of, I went back to Bran's whole fly or die thing, his vision from the beginning of the books. Now listen to this. Finally, he looked north. He saw the walls shining like blue crystal, and his bastard brother John sleeping alone in a cold bed, his skin growing pale and hard as the memory of all warmth fled from him. And he looked past the wall, past endless forests cloaked in snow, past the frozen shore and the great blue-white rivers of ice and the dead plains where nothing grew or lived. North and north and north he looked, to the curtain of light at the end of the world, and then beyond that curtain he looked deep into the heart of winter, and he cried out afraid, and the heat of his tears burned on his cheeks. So imagine that scenario, that what Bran saw, except instead Craster said like, yeah, bring it on, man. Heart of Winter, this sounds great, and just sort of went into the heart of winter instead of running away from it. I can imagine like a dark version of that, of Bloodraven essentially contacting Bran being what the others did to Craster. I think that would make a lot of sense, especially since we know it's a thing that already happened in the books. You don't have to make up a scenario. You can just say, okay, what if this happened to Craster and he just went for it? Okay, I think that kind of makes a lot of sense to me. Super chat from Ricardo Rodriguez, £5. Thank you, Ricardo. Very generous. Congrats on keeping the best A Song of Ice and Fire channel on YouTube. Oh, that's very sweet. Thank you. Will we see Christchurch Keep again when the story moves beyond the wall? If so, to what purpose? If we see it again, it would probably be when Bran's running from the others. To go from where he is back to the wall to get through it. Possibly hold the door and some kind of that. I can imagine they stop by Christchurch Keep. That'll be my guess. If we see it again, it will be while Bran and whoever's still alive from Bloodraven's cave, they're essentially fleeing through that. Yeah, that'll be my guess. But again, when we're talking about the flyer division, the communication, I don't think it's hard to guess how it works, just because we don't like literally have Craster say like, oh, well, I see visions in my sleep and then I think about things and then the others know them. I think you can kind of just fill in the blanks with the magical stuff that's already in the story and say like, oh yeah, that checks out. It's just Craster's not saying it. You can just fill in the blanks. I think that's essentially how it works. Let's see here. Oh, only 3 more likes for my Germ hat. If you guys are looking forward to that. Slam the MF and like button. So I think one thing to talk about next is sort of Craster's betrayals, because even though everybody sort of distrusts Craster, they still end up oh, hat swap time? All right. Man, I need to get a bigger wizard's hat. Kind of pinching on my forehead there. Turtle hat time. The more comfortable of the two. There we go. Looking like Germ at Halloween. Thank you guys for slamming that like button. We got 242 people watching. Thank you guys for spending your Saturday with me. We got about 40 minutes left. I got one section here, and then we'll just go straight into Q&A. I have some stuff here from patrons. So we'll go through this last one, and then that'll be it. So I think Craster's a lot sneakier than anyone really puts together. He seems very stupid, but he is. I don't think he may be ignorant. I don't think he's stupid. Like, for instance, I think one of the big betrayals from early in the books is the murders of Jaffa Flowers and Othor. So here's the quote from when they find their bodies when they eventually become whites. Again, knowing that Craster and the others are allies. Squatting beside the dead man he had named Jaffa Flowers, Sir Jeremy grasped his head by the scalp. The hairs came out between his fingers, brittle as straw. The knight cursed and shoved at the face with the heel of his hand. A great gash in the side of the corpse's neck opened like a mouth crusted with dried blood. Only a few ropes of pale tendons still attached the head to the neck. This was done with an axe. Okay, so George is telling us that Jaffa Flowers was killed with an axe. Okay, that's kind of weird. Why is that? Why do we get that detail? Well, when the Night's Watch shows back up at Christchurch Keep during the Great Ranging, what does Craster want? Let's see here. These are his demands. I could use me some wine and a new axe. Mine lost its bite. Can't have that. I got me women to protect. Okay, so George is also telling us that Craster favors axes and that his has lost its bite, meaning that he's essentially damaged it. Well, how do you damage an axe? Well, swinging it into somebody's neck would do it. Killing 2 Night's Watch Rangers or getting into a fight with them, yeah, that seems like it would probably be the kind of thing that would dull or nick an axe to the point that you need a new one. So I think it's pretty clear that Craster was involved with the ambush of Jaffa and Othor. Maybe Benjen, although he hasn't showed up again. Some possibilities Cold Hands, although George seems to say no in one of his notes. But yeah, I think it's pretty clear that Craster saw Jaffa Flowers, Othor, and Benjen, and then led the others to them, and then attacked, killing Jaffa Flowers himself with his axe. So that's not great. How tight is the Gandalf hat? It's not that tight. It's just I have a big head. Did he kill Benjen? I don't think so. I think Benjen got away. But you never know. But then there's also, obviously, Waymar Royce and his party that we see in the opening chapter. We learn during the chapters in A Clash of Kings that they stopped by Craster's Keep when they were chasing raiders. And then They stop by, they go by the fire. Craster really hates Varamyr. Picks out that he's a Stark. Hey, cold death in the snow, killing of a ranger. That whole thing. They also tell Craster that they're chasing raiders. Well, then we learn that the others kill these raiders and change them into wights to trap the raiders. I mean, to trap the rangers, and then they attack, dueling Varamyr Royce and the whole thing about how they think he's Jon Snow, etc., etc. Well, that's another instance where the Night's Watch assumes that their movements are being given over to the wildlings, but it's actually being given to the others. The others are learning about the movements of their enemies and presumably Starks that are on the move in the far north. So that's another level of what's going on with him, that the wildlings and the Night's Watch think they're being played against each other when they're both actually being played for fools for the benefit of the others. Yeah, the axe thing is just kind of a minor thing, but when you look back, it's totally obvious. It's like, oh yeah, that's what George is saying. And again, when you look back at Christchurch Keep, it's noted that I think that he has like some very nice chairs, he has furniture, but he doesn't seem like the kind of guy that has the skill to make these things. And then they go to White Tree Village and there's no furniture left. The entire place is cleared out. It seems like Craster essentially relies on the others as part of his whole survival technique, that they go in and they clear out a village or they kill a bunch of raiders or something like that, and then Craster shows up later and essentially loots and takes whatever's left, which isn't great, but it does add some logic to exactly how he's surviving. Yeah, he's their thrall, but he also totally relies on them. He essentially goes behind their killing sprees and just takes everything. Yes, thank you, Aaron, for linking Killing of a Ranger. Craster's a big part of it. And actually, my interest in Craster came before that theory. When I was researching Craster for these theories, trying to figure out who he is, trying to find his parents, like what the hell is he doing in the story, it was that information that then led me to the, oh, hey, he recognized Jon Snow as a Stark out of nowhere. Whoa, that's weird. Hey, he's related to the others. The others, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, all the things came together, but it started with Craster. My interest in this character who seems very, very strangely put in. You can kind of think of Christchurch Keep. There's sort of a... Yeah, let me fix those. There's sort of a trope that goes on in horror movies where... like, what are they? Like Wrong Turn or The Hills Have Eyes and other kind of things where... When the victims of the horror story to be end up exploring wherever they've been taken to, they eventually like find rooms full of stuff that belong to people they killed. And you can kind of think of Christchurch Keep like that. It's essentially like he's just looted all the corpses and helped the others kill the people around him, and essentially that's how he keeps his that's how he gets stuff, basically. Yeah, he's a hyena, he's a scavenger, that kind of thing. But he's also more not just a betrayer of the Night's Watch, but there's a lot of echoes of the character of the Night King in Craster. This is not new, obviously. This is well-known territory. So there's the figure known as the Night King, who crowned himself king at the Night Fort and was later defeated by Bran the Breaker and King Beyond the Wall Jorman in a awesome pincer move, killing him. It's noted it was discovered afterwards that he had been sacrificing humans to the others. He's also known as the 13th Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. He was sacrificing to the others, which indicates that the others were pre-existing and that he's not their origin of them, most likely. And that after the long night, they were not defeated, which of course makes sense because we know they're not defeated because they show up in the prologue. So that just kind of goes to, if you're trying to establish like the long-term timeline, the Night King story tells us that the others were not defeated and that there may be some sort of some deal made between the humans and the others for their defeat. Oh, a super chat here from Catherine. I think that's $5 Canadian. Google Joseph Fritzl. Yeah. I don't think that's the inspiration for Craster, but it's definitely a similar situation. Thank you. Let me drink some water. Throat's getting a little dry there. Yeah, Joseph Fritzl is a good comparison if you're looking for like, how could this happen? How could it be something as big as shit as Craster? Well, there's people in the real world like Joseph Fritzl that kept his family in his basement and stuff like that. Again, thank you for the super chat. So I don't mean to start a whole timeline argument about which came first, the Night King or the others, or the Night's Watch or whatever, but the story implies that the Night King came after the initial invasion. And that there maybe have been some sort of pact, that at least there's an understanding that there are humans who are sympathizers to the others, which we know from Craster definitely exists. So I've got the quote here for the Night King. According to legend, the Night King lived during the Age of Heroes, not long after the wall was completed. He was a fearless warrior named the 13th Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. Later, he fell in love with a woman with skin as white as the moon and eyes like blue stars. He chased her and loved her, though her skin was cold as ice. And when he gave her his seed, when he gave his seed to her, he gave his soul as well. He brought her back to the Night Fort, and after the unholy union, he declared himself king and her his queen, and ruled the Night Fort as his own castle for 13 years. During the dark years of his reign, horrific atrocities were committed, of which tales are still told in the north. It was not until Brandon the Breaker, the King of Winter, and Jormund, the King Beyond the Wall, joined forces that the Night's King was brought down and the Night's Watch freed. After his fall, when it was discovered he'd been making sacrifices to the others, all records of him was destroyed, and his very name was forbidden and forgotten. It is likely this that led the Lords of the North to forbid the Night's Watch to construct walls at their keeps, ensuring that the keeps would always be accessible from the south. Macers are skeptical of this legend, thinking that a Night's King Corpse Queen was possibly a daughter of the Barrow King from the Barrowlands. So yeah, that's sort of the whole story of Craster. If you sort of like added 5,000 years to it, it sounds almost exactly the same. Some random piece of shit who committed atrocities near the Night's Watch or is a member of the Night's Watch. Craster is obviously a Night's Watch bastard. Takes a corpse queen to be his wife or whatever. That could easily be somebody that was just like went along with this. You could imagine that the sons or the human sacrifices the Night King was making may have been his own children in a similar way to Craster. And it's also very likely that there are hints that the Night's Watch sacrificing to the others has been going on for a long time. So, for instance, the secret of the Black Gate underneath the Night Fort, well, that would be a very convenient way to sneak children from the north of the wall to give to the others, essentially as like a promise. Hey, a prince that was promised. Especially because we know that they're in the north, they practice prima nocta, which is the Lord's right to first night, which means when a couple gets married, the Lord has the right to essentially have sex with the wife first, or she has the right to rape her, basically. Well, if you think about that logically, that would create obviously quite a lot of royal or highborn bastard children that nobody wants. So what do you do with them? Well, George has such a very high interest in magical or highborn blood being important. You can very easily see that perhaps the first night practice led to these bastards being created, which then they would give to the Night's Watch, who they would then give to the others, which the others would use to, as we see with Craster's children, to keep their bodies going or make new bodies or something like that. I think it makes perfect sense for me that George essentially constructed a daisy chain of these like horrific practices that ended up with Craster essentially filling in the gaps for the relationship between the Night's Watch, the Northern Lords, and the others. That they were defeated, but they essentially made a bargain. And this is actually a plot, if you guys have ever read Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn by Tad Williams. The idea of princes being promised to these like crazy elven creatures is kind of a well-known idea, and human sacrifice makes a lot of sense. It makes sense, but it's also a horrific sense. Like, it's a long-term history of rape and kidnapping and children being sacrificed and given over to the others and all these like kind of things, essentially to keep the others at bay. Like, for instance, one of the other castles is known as Snowgate. Well, that's what it used to be called. What are snows? Snows are bastards. So a gate of the others, a gate of bastards being given over to the others. You can imagine that it all kind of lines up in a way that you have a long-term supply of unwanted children being given over to the others, much in the same way Craster does. Also, this may partially explain why the others are attacking. So, for instance, the First Knight has been outlawed in the north after Alysanne Targaryen, Good Queen Aly, came through and made some changes to their laws. Okay, so that means there's less highborn bastards to be given over. She also helped the Night's Watch build new castles and essentially made it feasible to abandon the Night Fort and therefore the Black Gate. So it may be that the others are attacking because they've essentially run out of, or their supply of human babies in order to keep themselves going has dwindled. Oh, somebody's been saying that in the chat. C-Bob, yeah. I think that's possibly part of it. Another part of it probably has to do with prophecy, and that since they are connected to the Weirwoods and et cetera, that the two things are connected. But why they need Craster and why they're getting so much more aggressive is because from their perspective, the humans may be breaking their pact to them. They are no longer providing them with princes. Also interesting, the Night's Watch is male only, and males are the only ones the others want. Lines up. And then there's also obviously the Night's Watch attack at the Fist, another betrayal. So the Night's Watch goes to Craster's place. They tell him where they're going. They go to the Fist of the First Men. Surprise, surprise, the others attack and try and kill them all. Again, indicating that the others have some method of communicating with Craster. He told them where they were going. And I think this kind of informs Egret's bias towards Craster beyond just what he's doing to his daughters. It may be that the wildlings have figured out that every time they tell Craster something, the others show up and put two and two together and like, oh shit, this guy, he's when he talks about the cold gods, he's serious. He means the others. Also interesting to note that Jon Snow was supposed to be at the Fist of the First Men, but just before it, he leaves with Qhorin Halfhand. Oops, the others missed again at getting Jon Snow. And I think, no, Craster's obviously not done in the story. His legacy still lives on, unfortunately. Presumably some of his daughters escaped. They may be with the wildlings at this point. If you wanted to look for people that may be Craster's daughters, Gilly is named after a flower, so perhaps look for named women within the wildlings who have flower names or plant names. That seems to be what Craster was going for. I just think the connection, you guys are talking about this more, the connection between what the Undying were trying to do to Daenerys and what the others are doing to Craster's sons, those seem like the same concept. They seem to be related. So I would assume that's what's happening here, that they essentially feed on the children like vampires or something and use them to replenish themselves. Yes, Sarah. Thistle, perhaps one of Craster's daughters. An escaped one. We know they did escape. And so, but like I was saying with Gilly, there's another son of Craster still out there. There's obviously Monster. Hey, Jon Snow did a baby swap. All the theories are right. There were baby swaps, except this one's real, and it's not a proposed one to make silly tinfoil stand up. There's a real baby swap. So Aemon told Jon that he feared that Melisandre would burn Mance's child alive to sacrifice to the flames. So he convinces Jon to do a baby swap. So he swaps Monster, who's the son of Craster, for Aemon Steelsong, who is the son of Mance and Dala. So the idea of a stolen child is very prevalent in myths and legends. Other people I know have written and made theories about stolen children. I'm not really going to super go into it, but there's definitely a theme there to think about with Monster and Aemon Steelsong, but particularly Monster because he's still at the wall. And in a way, if you consider Craster a king of his keep, well then, wouldn't that make his son a prince? Hey, he's a prince that was promised. That would be kind of the plot from Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, but it's very possible that the others may know that this child exists. I mean, they went after Sam and Gilly to go get him. They may know that this child is still alive and have a connection to him, and maybe he could serve as almost like a magical beacon that they're going to try and get him. Aemon Steelsong is definitely the name of a fantasy hero, though. If a Song of Ice and Fire goes plus 50 years, Aemon Steelsong is going to be quite a character, especially since he's the child of Mance and Dala. Ooh, so that's a lot of Craster. Let's take some questions here from Patreon, and we got about 20 minutes left, and then we'll take some from the chat, and we will call it a day. Oh, we got to 200 likes. Oh, thank you guys. I don't know. What should I do for 200 likes? Throw out some suggestions in the chat, because I don't know. I only got the 2 hats. Pitch some ideas. I'll pick a good one. So we already did Amy's question. Here's a question from Ramona from Patreon. She said, if Craster is Maester Aemon's son, Little Monster has enough Targaryen blood to interest a red lady who likes sacrifices, and she doesn't need a birth certificate to assess how useful a child's blood be when she needs it. Let's say to resurrect Jon Snow. Wouldn't that be a blow for our hero? Yeah, that is a very, even if I don't think that Monster has to be related to the Targaryens for the blood magic to work. But I think it's very possible that Melisandre will burn Shireen and then not stop there. Maybe she'll go after Monster. Although I think she knows the swap has happened. I think she knows that isn't Mance's son. I have no beer. I'm sorry. Although I'm going to be brewing some. But yeah, I think there's a very real possibility that Jon comes back from the dead and realizes that his life was paid for with the life of Shireen and Monster. I think that's a good call, and I think that's a pretty horrific way for George to do it, which means he probably will, because it would hurt to read. Sing something? Nope. Shake it. Shoe on head. This isn't 4chan. I'm not putting a shoe on my head. Put ghost on my shoulder. I don't think he's gonna stay. Oh, maybe this is something to think about for next time. Max L says, what about Beric, though? No one dies when he comes back. Yeah. He part of his soul doesn't come back, and Thoros essentially sort of seems like he's been drained of life over time. So maybe that's the kind of thing that's going to happen. Let's see here. Question here from Eric Foreg. What's your take on the odd behavior by the Black Brothers during the mutiny immediately before it? Was Bloodraven or time-traveling Bran manipulating them? If so, why? No, I talked about this earlier. I think their odd behavior is because they know that Craster has food because they gave it to him. And all their odd behavior is John and Sam. Oh, no, actually, it's a Sam. Sam's there. It's Sam not realizing that the Night's Watch has been paying off Craster, and that's why... that's what's going on with the mutiny. Although Bloodraven is watching because he tells Sam to run and to take Gillian Monster. So I would keep my eye on that one. Bloodraven is aware of the mutiny, but I don't think he started it. I think it more has to do with the food that they know Craster has, which they likely gave him. Another question from Eric Forek. With the baby swap, is Gilly's son at the wall still in danger of being taken by the others, or is he too old to be of interest to him? I kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, talking about how they may consider him a promised prince and they may still come for him. But also, if we look at with the Undying we're trying to do with Daenerys, which seemed to be some kind of like draining of her life force or her magic or something like that. I don't know if there's an age limit on when the others stop being able to essentially like vampire the kids, but I would guess there isn't one. And I would guess that yeah, a second. Checking PayPal real fast. I didn't miss one, did I? No, I didn't. Okay, good. I don't know if there's an age limit, but Daenerys seems to be up for grabs, basically, as far as the Undying are concerned. So I would guess that Monster is not out of the woods. Oh, that was weird. All right, so let's grab some questions from the chat. Just we got about 15 minutes left. We'll rapid fire these. Bulbasaur on head. Oh my god, expand my mind. No. Doing a headstand. I think you are very much overestimating my physical abilities. Need to find a third hat. No, I'm happy with my 2 hats. We'll think of something else. Let's see here. Guilty Undertaker says, how much is the recent rise of the others due to the sheer volume of sacrifices Craster is making to them? That could very well could be. You can kind of imagine that maybe when they don't have bodies, the others essentially exist as menacing mists that essentially like follow around people. But the sheer amount of sons that he's been producing and giving over may have allowed, like, maybe there was only like a handful of others at any one time that had bodies, perhaps given to them by the Night's Watch. But now that Craster has essentially industrialized the sun production, it's gone through the roof. And yeah, that he's essentially been like rearming them. Let's see here. I think that's definitely on the table, though. If Mel knows about the swap, why doesn't she try to interfere? That's a good question. She may be thinking that she always has Shireen in her back pocket. Maybe a more powerful sacrifice than Mance, since she believes that Stannis is the prince that was promised and Azor Ahai come again. So who needs Mance's child when you got Shireen ready to go? Man, that's a grim reality. That she's like judging children as she sees them. It's like, what's your value as a sacrifice? How old is Craster? His descriptions show him to be probably like somewhere like 40, 50, somewhere around there. Heard a very dark theory that Shireen will be the POV in her own sacrifice. Ugh. I imagine it will be Mel, but I also have some tinfoil that would be Davos, because that would be the character, the POV that would hurt them most to see Shireen burning from. or even if he comes across it afterwards. A Maester's chain. Oh, that's a good point. I think I do have one somewhere. It was from an old costume. Maybe I could get like a better one. That's not a bad idea. I like that one, V Queen. Although gotta be careful on the props. Aaron says, I like the theory from Joe Buckley on Twitter this week that Shireen would be strapped to a weirwood so Bran would be our perspective. That's another possibility. That was a very horrific idea from Joe. God love him. It sounds exactly horrible enough that George might do it. Always go for what would hurt the most. What would suck the worst to read, and you'll be pretty good at predicting George. Lore7N says, if Jon is supposed to be the balance of ice and fire, it doesn't make sense to me that burning would be the thing to bring him back. He's not balanced if he's a fire white. Huh. That's a good point. Although the only ice magic we see is like actual whites, so I don't think he'll be reanimated by ice magic. It may be that the whole Song of Ice and Fire thing is less magical, and because like Jon, he's a warg, but he's not casting spells, he's not doing anything more special than anyone else. It seems, I think the ice and fire thing is supposed to be just a marker of the person that will do it, not an indication of how magically powerful they will be. Like, I do like, though, that George included that scene in A Dance with Dragons where Jon has that dream where he's on the wall with a burning sword and ice armor, and he's cutting down all the whites as they come up the wall. I think that was kind of George playing with the fandom a bit, where he's essentially saying, like, oh, this is the kind of fantasy story you want. This isn't what I'm doing, though. I do wonder if that's kind of what that is, because he does do that in other places. Like, he also makes fun of himself when he's talking about Illyrio's plan, and he has the and it's essentially a stand-in for his own troubles with trying to figure out where A Song of Ice and Fire is going. There's also a line about how Littlefinger talks about like the problems of trying to forecast things 5 years in the future, which is him making fun of himself for the failed 5-year gap and why he didn't do it. Sing the Reigns of Castamere. The only thing I can sing, and not even well, is Jenny's song, but maybe for another time. I do not have a good singing voice, so no, you don't really. Both hats at once. Ooh, good question here from Adherence Idra? Don't know how to pronounce that one. Joe, do you think Mance and Craster are related? It's certainly possible. If a Night's Watch Ranger is getting down with a wildling woman and Craster's from White Tree Village, I mean, like, that seems like the obvious place for rangers going beyond the wall to find women to sleep with would probably be closer, is more likely. So it's possible that they are maybe like second or third cousins or something like that. There's no other settlements nearby, so yeah, very possible. Actually, I had a theory that that White Tree Village is essentially an entire village of Night's Watch bastards. I think that would make a lot of sense and probably be the kind of thing George would imagine. Like how Molestown is basically nothing but Night's Watch bastards too. Yeah, good call, Guilty Undertaker. He is basically another slaver in A Song of Ice and Fire. Very, very true. Aegon the Sixth. I wonder if that's how it worked during the last long night. Was there a last version of Craster feeding the rise of the others? Well, that's basically what the Night King did. That's what we hear. The story is essentially Craster. So we can imagine that maybe the others were effectively defeated, and there was some sort of promise to give them like just a small amount of children so that they could like keep themselves going a little bit but not be a threat. And what the Night King did is essentially he rearmed them, or he was trying to, and they ended up killing him before it went too far. Story of Stannis and Shireen could follow the story of Agamemnon. Stannis could sacrifice everything he had his daughters, save the army of Winterfell from becoming others. Yeah, that's what the show gave us. George has told us, though, in James Hibbard's book, that it will be Stannis that's ordering the burning of Shireen. So looking forward to that one. That it will not be Mel acting on her own, that Stannis does do it. Or that at least he orders it. Mallory will donate $25 if I sing a line of Jenny's song. I usually only sing it when I'm driving. And not well. I do love that song. It's also probably not a good time for it because my throat hurts, which I've been chugging water. Losing my voice a little bit. Pregnant Asha as the POV. Oh, that is brutal, Nicole. Shockwave, yeah, Davos comes back from Cannibal Island with Rickon just to see his princess burn. Yeah. Davos would be the one that would hurt the most emotionally from seeing Shireen die. So that's kind of what I'm banking on. Good call, video game Vision Quest. There's also shadow magic, blood magic, water magic, and stone magic. Yeah, it's a regular Avatar The Last Airbender up in there. Pull a rabbit out of my hat. No rabbits, only turtles. I can put a turtle on my hat. Kind of. I can take it off. That's kind of close, right? Isabel Lameko says, does Craster's death parallel the Night's King in some way? I never really thought about that, but a mutiny from the Night's King's servants would be interesting. Was there another Lord Commander at the time? Although the Wildlings have no part of Craster dying. So that part doesn't really match up with the pincer of Jorman and Brennan the Breaker. But that's something to think about. I hadn't really put that together. That would be an interesting thing to be expanded on, the parallels between that. Jay Moray says, could the Night King been motivated by the Andal invasion? Yeah, the show essentially well, not really the show. The histories tell us that it was the invasion of the Andals that I mean, there's different versions of it, but the one that seems the most reasonable is that the Andal invasion is kind of what pushed the children to the breaking point to create the others, because we hear about how the first men came with their fire and their axes and they chopped down some weirwoods, but we hear a lot about the Andal invasion and that they specifically went after like High Heart, and that I mean, there was a pact between the first men and the children from their first war, and then the Andals show up and break all those pacts. I would guess that the others were created in response to the Andals, especially because they were much more successful in their conquest. Raise your hand if you're obsessed with weirwoods. I did it, Burns. Oh, thank you for the subscription, Surreal Reality. A Dothraki POV prologue, huh? I think the TWOW prologue is going to be it has to do with Jane Westerling. I think George has said that she's going to be in it, so it's somewhere in the Riverlands. The epilogue, yeah, that one's up for grabs. He seems, well, if it has to do with Jane Westerling and Lady Stoneheart, maybe the TWOW epilogue would have something to do with that as well. There's usually a kind of symmetry to them. Although not always. Actually, no, they don't. The Dance of Dragons prologue is Varamyr, and the epilogue is Varys. There's not really a lot of connection there. So yeah, I guess it could be that. Max L had a good question. Hang on. Did I mix it? Do you think the others are going to be revealed to have redeeming qualities, or are they going to be utterly villainous? They are utterly villainous, but usually George has a way of giving his villains some empathy, or at least understanding, so they're not just flat characters. Like, they may have like a legitimate bone to pick with the children of the forest and the humans. They may have like good reasons for doing what they're doing. But ooh, that was a bad one for my voice. That didn't go so good. But you know, like most villainous characters, like maybe think about it in terms of like the Night's Watch and how they supposedly guard the realms of men, but they allow Craster to continue with his bullshit with his daughters. You can believe yourself to have a noble goal and still do horrific villainous things, much like Stannis with Shireen. Usually villains, what's the line? Villains believe themselves to be heroes of their own story. Like they will have some sort of good reason for why they're doing it. Yeah, or pathos. Good call, JMRA. But I think he'll explain it at some point. It'll make sense. Even if it's like something as simple as not wanting to die, and then the fear of the void basically driving them to want to live forever. I mean, like most people can understand that death is incredibly scary, and that what would you do to avoid it? Well, if there was a magical world, maybe you go as far as them. Sorry, Rob. Jeff was trolling when he said there is an update with Winds of Winter coming out. Sorry, that didn't come across quite as sarcastic as I was meant to be. We're not going to get Winds of Winter this year. There's not enough time, even if he announced it now, for it to be published. So at the earliest, it would probably be next spring or summer or something like that. Whenever it's done, but George has said it's not done, so who knows? Just the endless wait on the watch. Yeah, don't trust Jeff. He's always trolling when he talks about when Winds of Winter is coming out. I get excited about Winds of Winter, Bernie, but I don't get excited about it coming out. I'll be excited when he announces it. Until then, it's just like a fun thing to think about. Maybe one day we'll get it. Who knows? But yeah, never listen to Jeff. Jeff is always trolling when he's talking about Winds of Winter and George. Like, if you ever see him on Twitter and he goes like, oh, I have super secret information about, like, I have sources telling me it's coming out soon. He's always making that up. He's always just messing with you guys. I'm sorry to break the magic for you. But yeah, he's always trolling. Nothing will make 2020 worth it, Guilty Undertaker. Nothing. Let's go for any last questions. Throw them at me right now. Otherwise, probably gonna call it an afternoon. So what I have coming up, I check my work schedule if I'm working next weekend. I'm not sure if I am or not, so I'll let you guys know if there's going to be a stream next weekend or not. When I'm working, obviously I don't stream because I'm at work. videos that are coming out soon. Obviously the 5-year gap one and the Tattered Prince, who he really is. The 5-year gap one's basically done. I had to rewrite the Tattered Prince one. I'm most of the way done with that one, so I'm gonna be working on that. Patrons will obviously get it earlier. They'll get the I think at the highest levels you get 3 days early when those come out, and I'll also be doing a giveaway at the same time, and also launching quite a lot of stuff like the channel art, the new intro, merchandise, all that other kind of stuff will be coming at the same time. Good question from that name I can't pronounce. I'm going to call you AD. Who made the Horn of Jorman? It's small, so I'm guessing it's the children. I'm guessing the Horn of Jorman was made by the children as kind of like a like something that like nullifies the other's magic. That's my theory for what the Horn of Jorman is. That it's that it won't bring down the wall, but essentially it acts like you blow the horn and ice magic in the area just basically stops working. Was it Bloodraven's cloak that the stash of dragonglass and broken horn were wrapped in? Could be. But also we know Cold Hands goes around scavenging, so it was probably Cold Hands that left it, and he could have gotten it from anywhere. It could have been Benjins, could have been Bloodravens. There's a lot of dead Night's Watch Rangers in the Watch. I mean, out in the north, so it doesn't have to be someone's in particulars. A final super chat here from Jake. He says, playing a Clash of Kings mod on Warband while listening to your soothing voice talk about Song of Ice and Fire. Very chill afternoon. Thanks. Hey, thanks, Jake. Appreciate it. Very generous. I have not played that mod, but I know it's pretty good. I think we're gonna go ahead and call it there. Again, thanks everybody that showed up, slamming the like button, subscribing, do all the things. If you want to support me, as usual, I mean, there's PayPal and Super Chats. There's also Patreon. Mostly just likes and comments and subscriptions are much appreciated as worthy sacrifices to the Weirwood gods. I'll let you guys know if I'm going to be streaming this coming Saturday or not. I've also gotten requests that a certain stud of bookshelves would like to come on my channel sometime soon in the future, so probably be planning that one out. So get old Michael back on at some point. So I'm glad that this stream wasn't quite as bad as it could have been. Like the Varamyr one was like truly heartbreaking, and the Craster is too. But I think there's a lot more interesting things about Craster that don't have to do in particular with his horrific crimes, like his positioning and his connections to the legends and what's going on with him and the others. That stuff's, I think, more interesting. All right, well, thanks everybody. I will see you sometime soon. Bye.